My name is Michelle, 29 years old, and I never thought I'd be sending that text to my own parents as a single mom to 4-year-old Lucas and a full-time nurse at Memorial Hospital. I'd always depended on my mother for child care. That's why her words cut so deep that day. I couldn't watch your kid anymore after years of paying their mortgage and bills. I finally realized what our relationship had become. The choice I made next changed everything for us. Before I continue my story, where are you watching? From today, hit that like button and subscribe. If you've ever had to make a difficult decision with family, trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. I still remember the day I found out I was pregnant with Lucas. The 2 pink lines appeared on the test and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Brandon and I had only been dating for 6 months, and we'd always been careful. I called him immediately thinking we'd figure it out together, but his response made it clear I was on my own. "I'm not ready to be a father," he said, before hanging up 3 unanswered texts. Later, I realized he had blocked my number by the time I was 3 months pregnant. Brandon had moved to another state, leaving no forwarding address. That's when my parents, especially my dad Wesley, stepped in. Dad had always been my rock when I scraped my knee as a kid. He was there with a bandage and a joke to make me laugh through tears when I graduated nursing school. I saw him in the audience with tears of pride streaming down his face. We'd always been close. And that didn't change when I told my parents about the pregnancy. My mother Elaine's reaction was more measured. She wasn't thrilled about becoming a grandmother before her time, as she put it. But she quickly adjusted to the idea, family helps family. She said during a Sunday dinner, as my baby bump began to show when the baby comes, I can watch him while you work. Nurses' hours are crazy and daycare costs are ridiculous these days. Her offer lifted an enormous weight from my shoulders. My starting salary as a nurse wasn't bad, but the cost of living in our city plus childcare would have stretched me beyond my means. "Mom, are you sure I'll be working long shifts, sometimes overnight?" "That's what grandmothers are for," she replied with a smile that seemed genuine at the time. "Your father and I have plenty of space, and it'll be nice having a little one around the house again." When Lucas was born, all 7 lb60 of perfection, my parents were at the hospital. Within the hour, Dad brought a tiny baseball mitt, already planning future games in the backyard. Mom held Lucas with practiced ease, cooing softly to him. While I recovered from the delivery during my maternity leave, I noticed my parents struggling financially. Their mortgage payment had increased, and Dad's hours at the manufacturing plant had been cut back without thinking twice. I offered to help let me cover the mortgage until things get better. I suggested, "It's the least I can do since you're helping with Lucas." They initially refused, but after a few more tight months, they accepted what started as a temporary arrangement, soon expanded. I set up automatic transfers for their mortgage utilities and even their cell phone bills. Dad's car needed repairs, so I covered those too. Before long, I was providing significant financial support to my parents, but it felt right, a fair exchange for the child care that allowed me to work and support Lucas. For the first 3 years, everything ran smoothly. I'd drop Lucas off in the morning, sometimes as early as 5:30 a.m. for my 700A shift. Mom would feed him breakfast, take him to the park, read to him, and do all the things a loving grandmother would do. Dad would play with him after returning from work, and they'd send me pictures throughout the day that made my heart swell with gratitude. But something changed as Lucas turned 4. I began noticing subtle shifts in my mother's behavior. She'd sigh heavily when I dropped Lucas off, especially for early shifts. Another early morning, she'd mutter under her breath, though loud enough for me to hear when I'd pick him up. She'd immediately list all the challenging moments of the day, his tantrums, the mess he made, how he wouldn't nap. "He's going through a phase," I'd reassure her, trying to be understanding. "All kids do at this age. I've already raised my child." She'd respond with an edge to her voice. I didn't expect to be doing this all over again in my 60s. Still, I tried to remain optimistic. The arrangement benefited all of us. I reasoned my parents received financial stability. Lucas got loving care from his grandparents, and I could work the shifts necessary to advance my nursing career. The occasional complaints seemed a small price to pay for this balance we'd achieved. Then came the holiday schedule at the hospital. As one of the newer nurses in my unit, I often got assigned to work. Major holidays, this Christmas would be no different. I was scheduled for both Christmas Eve and Christmas Day shifts. Normally, my parents would adjust their plans to accommodate my schedule, understanding that hospitals don't close for holidays and patients need care regardless of the date on the calendar. I approached the conversation with my usual gratitude, bringing them a gift basket of gourmet foods. As a pre-think, I got my holiday schedule. I said, trying to sound casual as I placed the basket on their kitchen counter. I'm working both Christmas Eve and Christmas Day this year. I noticed the quick glance my parents exchanged, but pressed on. I know it's asking a lot, especially on Christmas, but I really need your help with Lucas. I'll make it up to you both, I promise. Maybe we can do our family celebration on the 26th instead. Little did I know that this request would shatter the fragile balance we'd maintained for the past 4 years and reveal the true nature of what our relationship had become. I couldn't watch your kid anymore, my mother said, her voice flat and final. I've given up enough of my life. The words hung in the air between us, stunning me into silence. We were standing in her kitchen, the gift basket I'd brought still sitting unopened on the counter. Lucas was in the living room with my dad, the sound of cartoons providing a cheerful soundtrack that contrasted sharply with the tension in the kitchen. What do you mean? I finally managed my voice, barely above a whisper. Mom, it's just for Christmas Eve, and day I have to work those shifts. I don't have a choice. She crossed her arms, a gesture I'd seen countless times when her mind was made up. I'm sorry, Amber, but I can't do it anymore, not on Christmas, not any day. I'm tired. Looking after a 4-year-old is exhausting at my age. The casual way she referred to Lucas as your kid instead of using his name felt like a slap. My son wasn't just some burden. He was her grandson, a child she'd helped raise since birth. But Mom, what am I supposed to do? I can't just not show up for work. People depend on me. Patients need care, especially during holidays. Well, you should have thought about that before becoming a single mother. She replied, the words cutting deep. There are consequences to our choices in life. I felt my cheeks flush with hurt and anger. That's not fair. You offered to help with childcare. We made this arrangement together, and I've been supporting you financially because of it. Her expression hardened. That's the least you could do considering everything we've done for you. Do you have any idea what it's like to raise a child all over again at our age? We should be enjoying our retirement, traveling. Having freedom instead, we're tied down with a child again. I glanced toward the living room, making sure Lucas couldn't hear this conversation. The thought that my mother viewed him as a burden was devastating all this time. I'd believed she loved caring for him, that our arrangement was mutually beneficial. Dad doesn't seem to mind, I countered, noticing how my father's laugh mingled with Lucas's from the other room. Your father goes along with whatever keeps the peace, she said dismissively. But trust me, he's just as tired as I am. I took a deep breath, trying to reason with her mom. I understand it can be tiring. Maybe we can adjust the arrangement somehow. I could try to find additional help for the more demanding days, but I really need you for Christmas. I've been paying your mortgage, utilities, car payments, all to show my appreciation for your help. Her eyes flashed. So now you're throwing that in my face, that money is the bare minimum for what we do. Do you know what professional childcare would cost you much more than what you're giving us? The conversation was spiraling out of control. I hadn't intended to mention the financial support as leverage, merely as a reminder of our mutual agreement, but her reaction suggested she viewed our entire relationship as a transaction, one where she was getting the worst end of the deal. I need to talk to Dad about this, I said, moving toward the living room. She grabbed my arm. He'll tell you the same thing. We've discussed it already when I entered the living room. Lucas ran to me with a drawing he'd made. Mommy, look, it's you at the hospital helping people. I forced a smile, taking the colorful scribble that vaguely resembled a person in scrubs. It's beautiful, buddy. Why don't you draw another one while I talk to Grandpa for a minute? My father looked up, his expression guilty. He already knew what was happening. Dad, I said quietly, sitting beside him on the couch. Mom says she can't watch Lucas for Christmas. Is that how you feel too? He avoided my eyes, fidgeting with the remote control. Your mother needs a break, Amber. We're not as young as we used to be, but it's Christmas, Dad. I have to work. What am I supposed to do with Lucas? He shrugged uncomfortably. Maybe one of your friends from the hospital, or a babysitter on Christmas. I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. Dad, please. I've never asked for much, and I've been helping you both financially for years now. His expression hardened slightly, surprising me. We didn't ask for that help, Amber. You offered it because you were struggling, and because you were watching Lucas, it was a fair exchange, one we all agreed to. He sighed heavily. Things change. People get tired. Your mother has given enough. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My father, who had always been my champion, was choosing my mother's convenience over my desperate need. The betrayal stung worse coming from him. I see, I said, fighting back tears. So this is it. After 4 years, you're just done. No notice, no transition, nothing. We've been hinting at this for months, Amber. You just haven't been listening. Had they had, I'd been so caught up in work and motherhood that I'd missed their growing resentment. Maybe there had been signs I'd ignored, hoping they'd pass. Lucas tugged at my sleeve, his little face concerned. Mommy, why are you sad? Why is Grandma angry? I picked him up, holding him close. Everything's okay, buddy. We just need to go home now. But I didn't finish my drawing for Grandpa. You can finish it at home. I said already, gathering his backpack. I couldn't bear to stay in that house another minute as we headed for the door. My mother reappeared. I hope you understand, Amber. We need our lives back. I couldn't respond without breaking down completely with Lucas in my arms. I walked out the door, closing firmly behind us in the car. As I buckled Lucas into his car seat, he asked innocently, Are we coming back tomorrow, Mommy? I don't know, sweetie, I answered honestly. Tears finally spilling over, I don't know. Driving home, panic began to set in. Christmas was less than a week away, and I suddenly had no childcare for my shifts. Every daycare would be closed for the holiday friends, with children would be celebrating with their own families. The few babysitters I occasionally used had all gone home for the holidays. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. I'm sorry it came out this way. Your mother has been feeling this way for a while. We should have talked about it sooner, too. Little too late, I thought. Bitterly, the reality of my situation was crushing. After years of believing we were all supporting each other as a family, I now faced the cold truth in my parents' eyes, especially my mother's. Our relationship had become purely transactional, and they had decided the transaction no longer benefited them. The next few days passed in a blur of desperate phone calls and mounting anxiety. Every potential child care option for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day led to a dead end. I'm so sorry, Amber, said Tiffany, a fellow nurse with children around Lucas's age. We're flying to my in-laws in Denver on the 23rd. Otherwise, I'd absolutely help you out. Mrs. Patel from Lucas's preschool, who occasionally did evening babysitting, was equally apologetic. We've had our family trip to visit my sister planned for months. Have you tried care? Sometimes college students stay local during the holidays, but even the online childcare services yielded nothing. The few sitters who were available wanted triple their usual rates for holiday coverage amounts I simply couldn't afford, especially while still making payments on my parents' bills. After putting Lucas to bed on the third night of my search, I collapsed onto my couch, utterly defeated. My shift supervisor had made it clear that finding coverage this close to Christmas would be impossible. We're already short-staffed. Mitchell, everyone with seniority requested these days off months ago. I need you there. My phone chimed with a notification, a Facebook alert. My mother had tagged my father in a post. Normally, I wouldn't have paid much attention, but the preview caught my eye. Something about finally taking that Florida trip. I opened the app, my hands trembling slightly. It was a photo of my mother holding up 2 plane tickets, beaming with excitement. The caption read, Christmas in the Sunshine State. After years of putting it off, Wesley and I are finally taking that Florida trip, leaving December 23rd. The timestamp showed she'd posted it just 20 minutes after I'd left their house with Lucas, The realization hit me like a physical blow. My mother hadn't refused to watch Lucas because she was tired or needed a break. She'd refused because they had planned a vacation they hadn't bothered to mention to me before I asked about Christmas childcare. I scrolled through the comments feeling sick to my stomach. "You deserve this. Enjoy the sunshine," wrote one of my mother's friends about time. "You two did something for yourselves," commented another. My father had responded to the post with a heart emoji and looking forward to some beach time with my beautiful wife. All this time, I'd been worrying about burdening them, feeling guilty about asking for holiday childcare, and they had planned a vacation without even telling me a vacation they could afford because I had been covering their bills. For years, with shaking hands, I opened my text messages and found my father's number. I typed, "Just saw Mom's Facebook post about Florida. When were you planning to tell me about this trip?" 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, his response came through. "We've been talking about it for months. Your mother needed something to look forward to, so this is why you can't watch Lucas. Not because you're tired, but because you're going to Florida this time." His response was, "Quicker, we're entitled to a vacation. Amber, we haven't had one in years. You could have told me your plans instead of making me feel guilty for asking for help." I wrote back, "I would have understood and tried to find other arrangements earlier. Your mother didn't want to disappoint you." Came his reply. A second message followed. "We didn't think you'd understand." I laughed bitterly at that. They didn't think I'd understand wanting a vacation. Me who hadn't taken a day off beyond necessary sick days. In 4 years, who worked holidays and weekends to support not only my son, but my parents as well before I could respond. Another text from him arrived. "Don't make your mother feel bad about this. She deserves some enjoyment after everything she's done." Something snapped inside me. I pressed the call button instead of texting back, suddenly needing to hear his voice to know if he really believed what he was saying. He answered on the 3rd ring. His voice cautious Amber for years. "Dad," I said, not bothering to hide. "The herd in my voice for 4 years. I've been paying your mortgage, your utilities, your car payments. I've covered emergency repairs, medical bills, everything, all while working full-time and raising Lucas. And you think I wouldn't understand wanting a vacation that's different?" He replied defensively. "You offered to help us financially. We didn't ask for it because you were watching Lucas. That was our arrangement. And now you're just what? Backing out with no warning so you can go to Florida." He sighed heavily. "Your mother needed this break. Amber, you don't understand how demanding it is, watching a child at our age. Then you should have said something sooner. We could have worked out a different arrangement instead. You've left me with no child care for Christmas and no way to find any. You're a resourceful girl. You'll figure something out." "Do you?" His dismissive tone stunned me. This was not the father I knew, the man who had always supported me through every challenge it was, as if my mother's resentment had gradually poisoned him against me too. "Put Mom on the phone," I demanded. "She's in the bath relaxing. I'm not disturbing her." "Fine. Then you can tell her something, for me. Tell her I saw her post about the new luggage she bought for the trip too, the $300 set she absolutely needed that I probably paid for with the money I send you every month." There was silence on the other end of the line. Nothing to say. "Dad, let me ask you something. Was any of it real? Did you ever actually want to help with Lucas? Or was it just a way to get money out of me? That's not fair. Amber, we love Lucas, do you? Because right now, it feels like you both used me and him for financial support. And now that you've saved enough for your dream vacation, we don't matter anymore. You're being dramatic," he said, his voice hardening. "Your mother is exhausted. She's 64 years old and has been chasing after a toddler for 4 years. She deserves a break, and I deserve the truth." Not finding out about your vacation plans from Facebook, I ended the call before he could respond, my hands shaking with anger and hurt. Minutes later, my phone lit up with a text from my mother. "Your father says you're upset about our trip. I'm sorry you feel that way, but we need this time for ourselves. You're a grown woman. Amber, figure it out." Like the rest of us have to figure it out, as if I hadn't been figuring everything out on my own for years, as if I hadn't been supporting not just my son, But my parents as well. I opened Facebook again and scrolled further through my mother's recent posts. There was another photo I'd missed. My mother showing off the expensive new luggage she'd purchased for their trip. Only the best for our Florida getaway. Read the caption. The comments revealed they'd been planning this trip for months, saving up for it, while I continued to pay their bills. One comment from my mother. Particularly stung, finally doing something for ourselves, after years of putting everyone else first. Putting everyone else first. When had she put me or Lucas first? I was the one working 60-hour weeks to support everyone. I was the one who hadn't taken a vacation since before Lucas was born. The betrayal cut deep, but something else was emerging through the pain. Anger, white-hot clarifying anger that burned away the fog of guilt and obligation I'd been living in. I opened my banking app and stared at the scheduled transfers set to go out in the coming week. Mortgage payment, utility, bills, car payment, credit card, minimum payment, all for my parents' accounts money that could be going toward finding emergency child care for Lucas or building my own savings instead of funding my parents' vacation. As I looked at those pending transfers, something shifted inside me. I'd been allowing this situation, enabling their dependence while neglecting my own needs and my son's future. Something had to change, and it needed to start right now. The glow of my phone screen illuminated my darkened living room as I stared at another Facebook notification. My mother had posted yet again a photo of her new swimsuit for Florida with a caption, "Treating myself before our much-needed vacation. No responsibilities, a freedom at last." No responsibilities, freedom. At last each word was a dagger. After everything I'd sacrificed, after all the double shifts I'd worked while pregnant, after skipping meals to save money for their car repairs, after postponing my own dental work to cover their property taxes. This was how my mother viewed her life with us, as a prison she needed freedom from. I walked to Lucas's room and gently pushed open the door. He was sleeping peacefully, clutching the stuffed dinosaur my father had given him for his third birthday. His dark lashes rested against his cheeks, his breathing soft, and even looking at him, I felt a surge of protective love so powerful it nearly brought me to my knees. This beautiful child wasn't a burden. He wasn't a responsibility to escape from. He was everything good and pure in my life, and anyone who couldn't see that didn't deserve to be part of our lives. I returned to the living room and opened my banking app again. With trembling fingers, I selected the first scheduled transfer, their mortgage payment. My finger hovered over the cancel payment button for just a moment before I pressed it, firmly. "Are you sure you want to cancel this scheduled payment?" The app asked yes. I whispered to myself, "Yes, I am." One by one, I canceled every scheduled payment: utilities, car payment, credit cards, insurance, everything with each cancellation. I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders, a clarity emerging through the hurt. Next, I called the bank's 24-hour customer service line. "Thank you for calling. First National Bank. How may I help you tonight?" the representative asked. "I need to cancel all recurring transfers from my account," I said, my voice steady and determined. "I'd be happy to help with that. May I ask why you're canceling these payments? Perhaps there's another solution we could offer. The recipients no longer require my financial assistance," I said simply. After verifying my identity and confirming the cancellations, I hung up and took a deep breath. The financial ties had been cut now. For the emotional ones, I opened my messaging app and typed a text to both my parents. "You're on your own now. I've canceled all payments to your accounts effective immediately. Enjoy Florida." Before I could second-guess myself, I hit send. Then I blocked both their numbers and their social media accounts. I knew it was drastic, but I needed space-time to process the betrayal without their justifications and guilt trips clouding my judgment for 4 years. I'd worked myself to exhaustion, trying to be the perfect daughter and mother. I'd skipped lunch breaks to save money for their bills. I'd worn the same 3 pairs of scrubs until they were threadbare, while my mother bought designer clothes. I'd put off enrolling in the advanced nursing certification program I dreamed of because I couldn't afford the tuition while supporting 3 adults and a child. All those sacrifices flashed through my mind. Sacrifices my parents had not only taken for granted, but had come to expect as their due. How had I not seen it sooner? How had I allowed myself to be used this way? The crushing weight of these realizations finally broke the dam, and I sobbed. Deep body-shaking sobs that released years of pent-up exhaustion, resentment, and hurt. I cried for the relationship I thought I had with my parents. I cried for Lucas, who loved his grandparents and wouldn't understand their sudden absence, most of all. I cried for myself, for the young woman who had tried so hard to please everyone that she'd forgotten to protect herself. When the tears finally subsided, I felt different, lighter, clearer, and more resolved. The pain was still there, but now it was accompanied by something else, determination. I opened my laptop and began searching again for emergency childcare options. The rates were exorbitant, nearly double my daily contribution to my parents' expenses. But now that I'd reclaimed that money, I could afford it at least temporarily. An email notification popped up on my screen. A response from an elderly neighbor, Sophia, who lived 2 floors down in our apartment building. I'd reached out to everyone I could think of, including leaving notes in neighbors' mailboxes. Dear Amber, her email read, I would be happy to watch your little boy for Christmas. My own grandchildren live across the country and won't be visiting until New Year's. It would be nice to have some company on Christmas Day. We could bake cookies and watch holiday movies. My rate is $20 per hour, but we can discuss if that's a concern. Warmly, Sophia. Jenkins, $20 per hour was steep. It would amount to over $300 for my Christmas shifts, but it was the only option I had. I quickly replied, accepting her offer and suggesting we meet the next day for Lucas to get comfortable with her before the actual childcare days. With that immediate problem solved, I allowed myself to feel the full impact of what I'd just done. I'd cut off my parents financially and emotionally. It was the right decision. I knew that in my bones, but it was also terrifying. They had been my safety net, my backup plan, my family now. It was just Lucas and me against the world. But maybe that was enough. Maybe we were enough for each other. I looked around our small apartment, seeing it with new eyes. It wasn't much, but it was ours. The walls were covered with Lucas's artwork photos of our trips to the park, the small Christmas tree we decorated together. This was our home, our life. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was fully in control of it. We're going to be okay, I whispered to the quiet room. We're going to be better than okay. My phone lit up with notifications. Likely my parents trying to reach me through other means now that they discovered they were blocked. I ignored them. Turning off the device completely tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But tonight I needed peace as I crawled into bed exhausted, but somehow lighter. I made a promise to myself and to Lucas. From now on, we would only allow people into our lives who truly valued us, who gave as much as they took, who saw us as blessings rather than burdens. And if that meant it was just the 2 of us for a while, then so be it. For the first time in years, I fell asleep without worrying about anyone else's needs, but our own. The following morning, my phone buzzed incessantly as soon as I turned it back on. 17 missed calls from my parents' landline. 23 text messages from unknown numbers. Likely my parents using friends' phones to bypass my blocks. 5 voicemails. I deleted the texts without reading them and hesitated over the voicemails. After a moment's deliberation, I decided to listen, needing to know what I was dealing with. The first was from my mother, her voice shrill with indignation. Amberlyn Mitchell, what do you think you're doing? We just got a notice that our mortgage payment was rejected. Call me back immediately. The second, also from her. This is completely unacceptable behavior. After everything we've done for you and that child. This is how you repay us, by trying to make us homeless. The third was for my father, his tone more measured but still stern. Amber, whatever point you're trying to make, this isn't the way to do it. Your mother is very upset. Call us back so we can discuss this, like adults. The fourth, again from my mother. Now tearful. We can't afford these bills on our own. Your father's pension isn't enough. What are we supposed to do? The final voicemail left at 3:17 a.m. was my father alone. Amber, I understand you're hurt, but cutting us off financially without warning isn't fair. Your mother didn't mean to upset you. She's just been stressed lately. Please call me. I'm worried about you. Worried about me, or worried about their mortgage payment. I deleted all the voicemails and blocked the new numbers they'd used to text me. "Mommy, who is that on the phone?" Lucas asked, padding into the kitchen in his dinosaur pajamas, his hair tousled from sleep. I forced a smile. "Just some work stuff, buddy. How about pancakes for breakfast while Lucas ate?" I checked my email and found messages from relatives I rarely spoke to. My mother had clearly been busy enlisting family members to pressure me into restoring the financial support. "Amber, your mother called, very upset," wrote my Aunt Susan. "She says you've cut them off without warning. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. They love you and Lucas so much." I closed my laptop, unwilling to deal with the family drama they were. Hearing only my mother's version of events, one that undoubtedly cast her as the victim at 10 Maui, the doorbell rang. I peeked through the peephole to see Sophia Jenkins, my elderly neighbor, standing in the hallway. I'd almost forgotten our plan meeting. "Good morning, Amber," she said when I opened the door at 72. Sophia was spry and sharp-eyed with silver hair, pulled back in a neat bun. "I hope I'm not too early." "Not at all. Please come in," I said, gesturing her inside. "Lucas, come meet Miss Sophia. She's going to watch you while I work on Christmas." Lucas shilly approached, half hiding behind my legs. "Do you like dinosaurs?" he asked tentatively. Sophia's face lit up. "Oh my. Yes, I used to take my grandson to the Natural History Museum all the time. Tyrannosaurus Rex was his favorite. Which one do you like?" "Best Triceratops," Lucas exclaimed, his shyness evaporating. "I have toys want to see," as Lucas led Sophia to his toy box. I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. She was kind and engaging with him, exactly what he needed. But watching them together made me think of all the moments my parents would now miss in Lucas's life, despite everything that thought still hurt after Sophia left, promising to return on Christmas Eve morning. I tried to explain the situation to Lucas in terms he could understand. "Buddy, there's something I need to tell you." I began, sitting him on my lap. "Grandma and Grandpa won't be watching you for a while." His little brow furrowed. "Because they're mad at me." "No, sweetheart, absolutely not," I said firmly, hugging him close. "They're not mad at you. Grandma and Grandpa are going on a trip, and then, well, we're going to spend some time just us for a while. But what about Christmas? Grandpa said we'd build the big Lego set together on Christmas." I swallowed hard. "Miss Sophia is going to stay with you on Christmas. While I work, you two can do something special together." His lower lip trembled. But I want Grandpa. Nothing prepared me for how those simple words would cut through me. For all my mother's complaints, for all my father's passivity, Lucas loved them. He didn't understand adult conflicts or financial arrangements. He only knew that his grandparents were suddenly absent from his life. "I know, buddy," I whispered, fighting back tears. "I'm sorry." The days leading up to Christmas were a blur of work shifts, dodging more attempts at contact from my parents, and trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. For Lucas, the financial strain of paying Sophia necessary. As it was added another layer of stress, her rate would consume a significant portion of the money I'd reclaimed from canceling my parents' payments on Christmas Eve morning. I arrived at the hospital for my 7:00 a.m. to 7:00 p.m. shift, feeling emotionally and physically drained. Sophia had arrived at 6 p.m. cheerful despite the early hour, with a bag full of Christmas crafts and movies for Lucas. "We'll have a wonderful day," she assured me. "Don't worry about a thing." The pediatric ward was decorated with twinkling lights and paper snowflakes. Normally, the festive atmosphere would lift my spirits, but today it only emphasized everything that had gone wrong. "You look like you could use this," said Rachel, a fellow nurse, handing me a cup of coffee during our brief morning break. Rough night I'd worked with for years, but had always kept my personal struggles private today. However, the weight was too much to bear alone. My parents bailed on watching Lucas for Christmas so they could go to Florida. I found myself saying, after 4 years of me paying their bills in exchange for childcare. Rachel's eyebrows shot up. "Wait, you've been paying their bills all this time?" I nodded, the reality sounding even more ridiculous when said aloud. Mortgage, utilities, car payments, everything. And then they just decided. They were done. No notice. Nothing. That's messed up, Amber. I had no idea you were carrying all that. I've hired a neighbor to watch Lucas, but she charges $20 an hour. That's more than I make after taxes. Rachel placed a hand on my shoulder. Why didn't you say something sooner? We could have helped. Maybe adjusted some shifts. I'm used to handling things on my own. I admitted, that's the problem. She said gently. You shouldn't have to when our break ended. I returned to my patience with Rachel's words echoing. In my mind, had I been so determined to prove my independence to show I could handle single motherhood that I'd isolated myself from potential support systems, had I put so much energy into maintaining my relationship with my parents that I'd neglected to build other connections during my lunch break, I retreated to the staff room and finally broke down. Sitting alone at the small table, I allowed the tears to come for Lucas's confusion, for my shattered relationship with my parents, for the years I'd spent trying to earn love that should have been freely given. The door opened, and I quickly wiped my eyes, not wanting to be seen crying at work. It was Rachel again, along with 2 other nurses from our unit. We thought you might need some company, Rachel said, sitting beside me and maybe a listening ear. For the first time, I opened up completely, telling them everything about Brandon's abandonment, my parents' initial support that gradually morphed into resentment, the financial arrangement that had drained my savings, and finally the devastating discovery of their planned vacation. I feel so stupid. I concluded I should have seen it coming. Don't do that to yourself, said Megan. Another nurse, you were trying to make things work for everyone, especially your son. There's nothing stupid about that. What will you do now? Asked Rachel. I don't know, I admitted. Find a more permanent child care solution. I guess try to rebuild our lives without them in it. Megan said thoughtfully. My sister runs a daycare center that offers extended hours for healthcare workers. It's not cheap, but it's less than $20 an hour. I could put in a word if you're interested, and my kids would love play dates with. Lucas, added Rachel. My husband works from home 3 days a week and wouldn't mind an extra little one around. Their offers of help, so freely given without expectation of repayment, brought fresh tears to my eyes. All this time, I'd been so focused on maintaining the dysfunctional support system I had that I hadn't sought out healthier alternatives. As my shift continued, I found myself thinking about Lucas and what kind of Christmas he was having with Sophia. Would he feel abandoned on what should be a magical day? Would he understand why his grandparents weren't there to celebrate with him? By the time I clocked out at 7:15 p.m., exhaustion had settled deep in my bones. I still had a 12-hour shift the next day, Christmas Day, but at least I would have the morning with Lucas to exchange gifts before Sophia arrived. Driving home through streets decorated with holiday lights, I allowed myself to imagine a different kind of future, one where Lucas and I were surrounded by genuine support rather than conditional help, where we built our own traditions instead of trying to fit into someone else's expectations. It wouldn't be easy, but perhaps it would be healthier for both of us. When I arrived home, I found Lucas and Sophia making paper snowflakes at the kitchen table. My son's face lit up when he saw me. Mommy, look what we made. Miss Sophia says we can hang them on the tree. They're beautiful, buddy, I said, genuinely smiling for the first time that day. Did you have a good time? Uh-huh. We made cookies, 2 Christmas trees with green frosting. Sophia gathered her things, assuring me that Lucas had been a delight. We had a wonderful day. I'll be back tomorrow at noon for your next shift. After she left, Lucas and I hung the paper snowflakes on our small tree. Can we open one present tonight? He asked. Hopefully, Grandma always let me open one on Christmas Eve. The mention of my mother sent a pang through my heart. Yes, you can pick one small gift to open tonight. As Lucas carefully examined the packages under the tree, I checked my phone. 3 more missed calls from unknown numbers and a text from my aunt. Your parents are devastated, Amber. Your mother has been crying all day. Please reach out to them. I put the phone away, refusing to let guilt overshadow this moment with my son. Tomorrow would be our first Christmas without my parents, and somehow we would make it special. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold, with sunlight streaming through the frost-patterned windows of our apartment. I woke early, determined to make the day special for Lucas. Despite everything, I quietly set out the cinnamon rolls I'd prepared the night before and started the coffee before tiptoeing to the living room to arrange his gifts. My budget had been tight this year, even before the childcare crisis, but I'd managed to get Lucas the dinosaur playset he'd been asking for, along with new winter clothes books and a few small toys. It wasn't extravagant, but I hoped it would be enough to make the day magical for him at 7:30 a.m. Yum! I heard the patter of small feet, followed by an excited gasp, as Lucas discovered the living room. "Mommy, Santa came!" he exclaimed, rushing to my side. "Can I open them? Please, please, please." I laughed my heart, lightening at his enthusiasm. Breakfast first, then presents, that's the rule. Remember, we ate cinnamon rolls, and I sipped my coffee while Lucas chattered excitedly about what might be in each wrapped package. This simple moment, just the two of us in our pajamas on Christmas morning, felt surprisingly peaceful. No tension, no walking on eggshells around my mother's moods, no subtle digs about my parenting or Lucas's behavior. Just us together after breakfast. Lucas tore into his gifts. With unrestrained joy, each revelation met with squeals of delight. The Miadino world. "You got it, you got it!" he shouted, jumping up and down when he unwrapped the main gift. "Santa got it," I corrected with a wink. "Santa knew exactly what I wanted," he replied, then looked up with sudden concern. "But who helped?" "Santa Grandpa always said he helped Santa with the big gifts." The innocent question caught me off guard. "Well, this year I helped Santa," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "And you know what? Santa told me you've been such a good boy that he wanted you to have something special." Lucas seemed satisfied with this explanation and returned to examining his new dinosaurs. I was just helping him open the packaging when a knock at the door startled me. It was 9:45 a.m. too early for Sophia, who wasn't due until noon. I wasn't expecting anyone else. Cautiously, I approached the door and looked through the peephole. My father stood in the hallway alone, shifting nervously from foot to foot. He was dressed in his Christmas sweater, the one with the light-up Rudolph nose that Lucas always found hilarious, and held a large gift bag. My first instinct was to ignore the knock to pretend we weren't home, but Lucas had already heard it. "Who is it, Mommy? Is it Miss Sophia?" "No, buddy, it's—" I hesitated, then sighed. "It's Grandpa." Lucas's face lit up. "Grandpa, let him in. I want to show him my dinosaurs." I stood frozen, torn between protecting myself from more hurt and allowing Lucas the joy of seeing his grandfather on Christmas. The latter went out. I couldn't punish my son for the failings of the adults in his life. With a deep breath, I opened the door. "Merry Christmas," my father said quietly, his eyes meeting mine with uncertainty before I could respond. Lucas started past me. "Grandpa, Santa brought me the Megadino world, the one you showed me in the store." My father's face softened as he looked down at Lucas. "Did he now? That's wonderful, buddy. Santa must know what a special boy you are." I stepped back, allowing him to enter, but maintaining an emotional distance. "I thought you'd be in Florida by now," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "I didn't go," he replied, setting the gift bag down. "Your mother went ahead without me." This revelation surprised me. My parents rarely did anything separately, especially not vacations. Why, he gestured toward the couch. "Can we talk, please?" Lucas had already returned to his new toys, making dinosaur sounds as he arranged them on the coffee table. I nodded reluctantly, and we sat at the kitchen table, far enough from Lucas that he wouldn't overhear our conversation, but close enough that I could keep an eye on him. "I couldn't go through with it," my father began, his voice low. "After you blocked our numbers and canceled the payments, your mother and I had a big fight. She wanted to use the emergency credit card to go to Florida. Anyway, I told her I thought what we'd done to you was wrong. I remained silent, unwilling to make this easier for him. She went alone," he continued. "Said she deserved the vacation after everything, but I couldn't enjoy myself knowing what we'd done to you and Lucas. And what exactly did you do to us?" "Dad?" I asked, needing to hear him acknowledge it. He looked down at his hands, weathered and calloused from years of work. "We used you, Amber. We took advantage of your generosity and your love for us. We accepted your financial support while resenting the very thing that prompted it. Caring for Lucas, the admission hung in the air between us. At first, it wasn't like that," he continued. "In the beginning, we genuinely wanted to help. Your mother loved taking care of Lucas when he was a baby. But as he got older, more active, more challenging, she started to see it as a burden rather than a joy, and..." He paused visibly, struggling. I failed you both by not speaking up. When I saw what was happening, I let her. Resentment grow without addressing it. And I let her take advantage of your financial support. Why didn't you just talk to me? Ask the hurt still raw. We could have figured something out instead. You let me find out about your vacation plans from Facebook, after making me feel guilty for asking for Christmas childcare. I have no excuse. He said simply, I was a coward. I didn't want to upset your mother, and I didn't want to admit what our relationship had become. It was easier to go along with her than to face the truth. I studied my father's face, noting the dark circles under his eyes and the slump of his shoulders. He looked older than he had just a week ago, worn down by the weight of his choices. I'm not here to ask you to restore the financial support. He said firmly, that's not why I came. I came because I was wrong, and I needed to tell you that face to face, and because I couldn't bear the thought of Lucas not having anyone to watch him on Christmas while you work. I raised an eyebrow. So, you knew I was working today? He nodded. I called the hospital yesterday, pretending I needed to reach you about a family emergency. They told me you were scheduled for both Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. I found someone to watch him. I said an elderly neighbor. She's coming at noon, call her. Tell her she's not needed today. He said, let me watch Lucas while you work, not as a permanent solution, but just for today. Let me begin to make things right. I hesitated, conflicted. Could I trust him? After everything that had happened, would it confuse Lucas more to have his grandfather back, only to potentially lose him again? What happens after today? I asked, what's your plan? Dad, because I can't keep doing this back and forth. It's not fair to Lucas. I've been looking at apartments, he said, surprising me again. Nothing fancy, just a small one-bedroom near here. Your mother and I. Well, I don't know what's going to happen when she gets back from Florida, but regardless, I want to be part of Lucas's life on your terms. With clear boundaries and the financial support I pressed is over, he said firmly. I've already applied for a part-time job at the hardware store to supplement my pension. I should have done that years ago instead of becoming dependent on you. I glanced over at Lucas, who was lining up his dinosaurs in what appeared to be a parade formation, completely absorbed in his play. He loved his grandfather, and despite everything I knew, my father loved him too. Okay, I said finally. You can watch him today, but this doesn't fix everything, Dad. We have a lot more to talk about. Relief washed over his face. I know this is just a start. I called Sophia and explained the situation, offering to pay her a cancellation fee, which she graciously declined. Then I went to get ready for my shift, leaving Lucas and my father in the living room, already deep in conversation about the proper classification of dinosaurs before leaving. I pulled my father aside. I meant what I said. This is a first step, not a solution. We need to establish clear boundaries going forward. He nodded solemnly. I understand, and Amber, thank you for giving me this chance. I don't deserve it, but I promise I won't waste it. As I drove to the hospital, I felt a cautious optimism taking root alongside the hurt and disappointment. My father's apology hadn't erased the pain of my mother's rejection or the years of imbalance in our relationship, but it was a beginning, an acknowledgement of the problem, and a willingness to change for the first time in years. Felt like we might be moving toward a relationship based on mutual respect, rather than financial dependency and obligation. It wouldn't be easy, and the road ahead was uncertain, especially with my mother still clinging to her resentment. But for Lucas's sake, and for my own, I was willing to try, with clear eyes, firm boundaries, and the wisdom that comes from finally recognizing your own worth. 3 months had passed since that pivotal Christmas day, and spring was beginning to emerge in tentative buds and warmer breezes. I sat on a park bench, watching Lucas chase bubbles with my father across the playground, their laughter carrying on the wind. Higher. Grandpa, blow them higher! Lucas shouted, jumping to catch a bubble that floated just beyond his reach. My father obliged, his face alight with genuine joy. As he watched his grandson's antics at 65, he seemed younger now than he had in years. More energetic, more present, more authentic in his interactions with both of us. True to his word, he had rented a Small one-bedroom apartment, just 10 minutes from ours. The hardware store had hired him for 20 hours a week, which combined with this pension allowed him to support himself modestly but comfortably. More importantly, he had become a consistent, positive presence in Lucas's life, picking him up from his new daycare 2 afternoons a week, taking him to the park on weekends, and being the grandfather he'd always had. The potential to be my mother had returned from Florida 3 days after Christmas sunburned, and indignant to find her husband had moved most of his belongings to a furnished rental. Their confrontation had been predictably explosive, with my mother furious about both his betrayal and the cessation of my financial support for weeks. She had refused all contact with either of us, maintaining that she was the injured party in the situation. Even now, 3 months later, her interactions with Lucas were strained and infrequent. A sharp contrast to my father's devoted involvement. "Mommy, look." I caught one, Lucas called, running toward me with his hands cupped carefully around a captured bubble that would inevitably pop before he reached me. "Wow, that's amazing, buddy." I cheered him on anyway, knowing that the attempt was what mattered to him. My father followed at a more sedate pace, settling beside me on the bench as Lucas raced back to the bubble wand I'd brought. "He's growing so fast," my father remarked. "Seems like just yesterday he was learning to walk." "Time flies," I agreed, then added with a hint of pointed humor, "especially when you're paying attention." My father acknowledged the gentle dig with a ruffled smile. "I deserve that. But I am paying attention now, and I don't intend to miss any more of his childhood than I already have. The past 3 months had seen more honest conversations between my father and me than we'd had in years, through these talks often difficult and uncomfortable. We had begun to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of truth rather than convenience or obligation. "Have you heard from Mom today?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He shook his head. "Not since Thursday, when she called to complain about the property tax bill." My mother's adjustment to the new financial reality had been rocky. At best, she'd been forced to take a part-time job as a receptionist at a local insurance office, her first employment in over a decade, and she resented every minute of it. In her mind, I had betrayed her by withdrawing support, and my father had compounded that betrayal by siding with me. "The family therapist thinks she's still in." "The anger stage," I said, referring to the counseling sessions we'd begun attending together 6 weeks ago. "She hasn't reached acceptance yet." The decision to try family therapy had come after a particularly tense encounter at my parents' house, where my mother had made several passive-aggressive comments about ungrateful children. Within Lucas's hearing, my father had suggested counseling as a neutral space to work through our issues. And surprisingly, my mother had agreed, though her participation thus far had been more about airing grievances than seeking resolution. "She'll get there," my father said, though his tone lacked conviction. "It's a big adjustment for her, for all of us," I corrected, "but at least some of us are trying to make it a positive change." And it had been positive, especially for me. The promotion I'd been hoping for had come through last month, assistant nurse manager in the pediatric ward, with a substantial salary increase and more regular hours without the financial drain of supporting my parents. I'd been able to enroll Lucas in a quality daycare center that specialized in early childhood education, complete with after-hours care for healthcare workers. Most importantly, I'd found my voice where once I would have swallowed my feelings to keep the peace. I now spoke up when boundaries were crossed. When my mother had tried to guilt me about not bringing Lucas to visit her, I had calmly explained that her attitude toward him would determine how much time they spent together. When my father had shown up unannounced one evening, I'd firmly reminded him of our agreement about scheduled visits, small steps but significant ones in reclaiming my autonomy. "Have you thought any more about the advanced certification program?" my father asked, referring to the nursing specialty I'd long wanted to pursue. "I'm starting this fall," I said, unable to keep the pride for my voice. "1 evening class per week and online modules I can do on my own time. The hospital is covering part of the—" "That's wonderful, Amber. I always knew you had it in you." He paused, then added softly, "I'm sorry we held you back for so long." These moments of recognition from him still caught me off guard, acknowledgments of how their dependence had limited my growth and opportunities. Each one helped heal a small piece of a hurt I'd carried, Lucas. Not so far, I called as my son ventured toward the edge of the playground. He waved acknowledgement and turned back toward the swings. He's so confident, my father. Observed so much like you were at that age before he trailed off. But I knew what he meant before my mother's critical nature had eroded my self-assurance, before I'd learned to place others' needs above my own to earn approval. That's why I'm doing all of this, I said, breaking the cycle. I don't want him growing up thinking love is conditional or that his worth depends on what he can do for others. My father nodded his eyes on Lucas. You're a good mother. Amber better than we deserve the therapy. Sessions had been revealing in unexpected ways through them. I'd come to understand that my mother's resentment stemmed partly from her own unfulfilled dreams and partly from generational patterns she'd inherited from her own parents. That understanding didn't excuse her behavior, but it helped me respond to it with less emotional reactivity. Are you coming to his birthday party next weekend? I asked. Changing the subject wouldn't miss it. Your mother mentioned she might stop by too. This was news to me. Really? She hasn't responded to the invitation. I think she's afraid of being rejected if she shows too much interest. He admitted her pride is still bruised. Well, Lucas would love to see her. The real her. Not the resentful version who makes him feel like a burden. My father nodded. I'll talk to her. She's been different lately, less angry. I think the therapy might be helping more than she lets on. I allowed myself a small hope that this might be true. Despite everything, I didn't want Lucas to grow up without his grandmother in his life. But I was also prepared for the possibility that she might never fully accept our new dynamic. Lucas ran back to us, flushed and happy. Can we get ice cream? Now you promised if I played nice with the other kids. I laughed. I did promise, didn't I? Let's go. As we walked to the nearby ice cream shop, Lucas between us, holding both our hands, I reflected on the journey of the past 3 months. The pain of that Christmas confrontation had gradually transformed into something unexpected, a catalyst for growth and change that had ultimately benefited all of us. My financial situation had improved dramatically. Now that I was supporting only myself and Lucas for the first time since his birth, I had a small but growing savings account and was even considering the possibility of buying a condo in the next few years. More importantly, my emotional well-being had flourished. The constant stress of trying to please my parents while managing their needs alongside my own had lifted, allowing me to be more present with Lucas and more fulfilled in my work. I'd even started dating occasionally. Nothing serious yet, but a tentative step back into that part of life I'd neglected for years. My father, too, seemed happier in his newfound independence. The job at the hardware store had given him purpose, and social connections beyond my mother, and his relationship with Lucas had deepened into something genuine and mutual rather than obligatory. Even my mother, despite her ongoing struggles with the new arrangement, had shown small signs of growth. Last week she had brought Lucas a book about dinosaurs, his current obsession, and had actually sat with him while he explained each one in painstaking detail. It was a tiny step, but a significant one for her at the ice cream shop. Lucas deliberated seriously over the flavors before selecting strawberry with rainbow sprinkles. My father chose vanilla, and I went with chocolate. We sat at a small table outside, enjoying the spring sunshine, and each other's company. Mommy, Lucas said, between licks of his rapidly melting cone. Is Grandma coming to my birthday party? I glanced at my father before answering. I hope so. Buddy, would you like that? He nodded enthusiastically. I want to show her my new dinosaur books, and maybe she won't be grumpy anymore out of the mouths of babes. I exchanged a look with my father, who seemed equally struck by Lucas's innocent assessment of the situation. Grandma's been learning some things lately, my father told him gently, about how to be happier and how to show people she loves them better. It's hard work for her, but she's trying. Lucas considered this with the simple wisdom of childhood. When I'm learning hard things like tying my shoes, I get grumpy too. But then when I can do it, I feel proud. That's exactly right, I said, amazed at his insight, and we're all learning right now. Grandma, Grandpa, me and you too. As we finished our ice cream and headed back to the cars, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent. For much of my adult life, the road ahead wasn't perfectly clear. My relationship with my mother might never fully heal, and maintaining healthy boundaries would require ongoing vigilance. But for the first time, I was facing these challenges from a position of strength rather than desperation. The hardest lesson I'd learned through all of this was that sometimes love meant standing firm rather than giving in, that healthy relationships required mutual respect and reciprocity, not just sacrifice, and accommodation, that setting boundaries wasn't selfish but necessary for genuine connection. These were the lessons I hoped to pass on to Lucas. As he grew, that his worth wasn't tied to what he could do for others, that love shouldn't require the diminishment of self, that genuine support flowed both ways. By modeling these truths in my own life, I was giving him a foundation stronger than the one I'd been given. Same time next Saturday, my father asked as we reached the parking lot. Sounds perfect. Agreed, and Dad, thank you for being here. Really being here for both of us. He embraced me briefly, then knelt to give Lucas a proper bear hug. Nowhere else I'd rather be as we drove home. Lucas chattering happily about bubbles and ice cream and dinosaurs. I felt gratitude for the painful awakening that had led us here sometimes. The most valuable gifts come wrapped in the most challenging packages. My Christmas text, "You're on your own now," had been born of hurt and anger, but it had ultimately freed us, all to build something healthier and more authentic. The journey wasn't over, but we were on a better path now. One where love was demonstrated through respect rather than financial transactions, where boundaries were honored rather than resented, where each of us could grow into our best selves instead of remaining locked in dysfunctional patterns. And that was a gift worth every difficult moment along the way. What about you? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took advantage of your generosity? How did you find the strength to stand up for yourself? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. If you want to hear more stories about navigating complex family dynamics, thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most beautiful beginnings. Inglés, llegada automáticamente.